welcome back to Mindful Musings podcast. I'm Linda Brooke. I'm here today with my co-host, Barbara McKenzie, my co-creator. And we are going to do an inspirational source reading for you today and see how that speaks to you. So Barbara, what resource are we using today?
Today we are going to pick from the Book of Runes, from Ralph Blum's Book of Runes. So we have I have a bag of 25 runes, and I'm just putting my hand in. And Linda, why don't you tell me when to stop?
Oh, Barbara, stop.
So I was just touching them, and when I pulled two out. So one is upside down and the other is right side up, and that matters. But I think we should just select one. So Linda, I'd like you to choose left or right.
Let's do right brain.
Okay. So the right rune is number 16, and its key name is growth.
And was it upright or?
It's upright.
Oh, okay.
It is upright. Yes, it is. Number 16 is page 98. And there are three keywords for this rune, which name is Berkana, Berkana. And the three words associated are growth, rebirth, and a birch tree. So it says, the rune of life process, another of the cycle runes, Berkana, denotes that form of fertility that promotes growth, both symbolically and actually. The growth may occur in affairs of the world, family matters, one's relationship to oneself, or to the divine. This is a leading to rune, in that it leads to blossoming and ripening. What is called for here is going into things deeply with care and awareness. This rune is concerned with the power of influencing development and with the flow of beings into their new forms. Its action is gentle and penetrating and pervasive. First, disperse resistance, then accomplish the work. For this to happen, your will must be clear and controlled. In regard to the issue, which we didn't pick an intention really for today's pick, but it says, in regard to the issue, your motives must be correct. Any dark corners should be cleansed. This must be carried out diligently and sometimes with expert help. Modesty, fairness, patience, and generosity are called for here. Do you possess these virtues? Once resistance is dispersed and rectification carried out and seen to hold firm, then through steadfastness and right attitude, the blossoming can occur.
Wow. So how's that speaking to you today, Barbara?
Well, I think in lieu of what's going on in the world these days, this is a calling to each of us to clean our house and take care of our soul. And I love that this book, which was published in 1982, first edition, lays out the virtues, which you and I are both, we've invested decades into studying. And it names them. So that really stands out to me. And it says, do you possess these virtues? Like there's no monkeying around. It's, it cuts right to the clarity of the point. It's like, do you possess these character traits is not as clear as do you possess these virtues. And I think to some degree the word virtue has been villainized because of its associations over the years. So I really see what we're doing as its own kind of sweeping out of the dark corners, because we're bringing what we do with these parts of who we are, we're bringing that out in a very tangible and day-to-day, everyday way. There's nothing magical, there's nothing mystical necessarily, although they're magical and mystical. But and I feel like, we're in season 2 now of our podcast, and it kind of feels like, maybe there's growth and blossoming yet to come. And I hold firm and steadfast to always have the right attitude. That's my intention for everything I do. So the blossoming can occur, not just for me, but for what I feel my role is for the rest of my life. Yeah. So that's how it's speaking to me.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm hearing that great passion again that you have for the work that you do, and the integration of the virtues into everyday, how you approach it, and your attitudes towards life, and to make it practical. It's not all woo-woo stuff, like the recognition that to own it, to the courage to come right out and say, yeah, I'm owning this, and to live it, to walk your talk, to make it alive in your everyday commitments and activities, and your service to humanity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Linda. So what jumped out at you today?
Well, the first thing that strikes me is the idea of it being connected to the birch tree.
Oh yeah.
So they're talking about the blooming and the growth and the process involved. And I grew up knowing another reference to the birch tree as being the widowmaker.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, because the top of the tree dies first. And so they have to be very careful when they're chopping it down, because when people started chopping at the bottom, if they, weren't
imagine
cautious, the top falls off and lands on the person chopping the tree. So it had the nickname the Widowmaker. At least, in the parts of Ontario, up near Haliburton, where I became aware of that expression. So Halliburton, Ontario. Yeah. And how important, again, that is part of the growth process in spiritual work, right? You have to have the death of the old to prepare for the new. And so then the connection that they had with the virtues. Can you repeat the virtues that they said we need to have for me, please?
Yeah. Modesty,
Yeah.
patience, fairness, and generosity.
Yeah.
But it also says, any dark corners should be cleansed. This must be carried out diligently.
Yeah. And so this is what I'm seeing in terms of the process, that if we have these virtues, the modesty, the patience, the sorry, can you
Fairness and generosity.
and generosity, that those are really, really must-haves to let go of old thinkings, old beliefs, old ways of being in the world that are no longer serving us, old processes that are no longer effective. So in order to create something new, one has to get to that place. So that means really the death of the old.
Yeah.
Right. And that paves the way for us to be able to move forward, to see things in a new way, to choose, make different choices, to be open, you know, to have the courage to create something new. So that's kind of how it's speaking to me today, is the connection between growth, you know, requires not just the creativity has to start with the ability to let go of something old, to let something die within us, and have the acceptance to do that, to move forward. And that it can be a much more peaceful transition. But it does take diligence to go through the upsetting times when we want to hold on to what was. And our fear might make it challenging for us to face going forward and accepting new things. So, yeah, that's how it's speaking to me today. And as you said, the circumstances that we are in 2020, you know, that started globally awareness, a global situation that everyone's conscious of all around the world with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's really an opportunity. You know, it's really created an opportunity for us all to re-look, you know, re-examine and experience changes. And it's an opportunity for us all to look at, oh, gee, how do I respond to this? You know, am I willing to, whose voice do I listen to as I help myself deal with what is on a day-to-day basis? And so it's an opportunity for us all to really examine who we are and how we deal with life, and how willing are we to be open to change, to newness, to guidance from others. Whose voices do we listen to? What gets stirred up in us? You know, do we panic? Do we, out of fear, get when that fear arises, you know, are we able to calm ourselves and come from rational places, or do we react out of fear and anger and, you know, dig our heels in and say, oh, I'm not wearing a mask, or I'm not doing this, I'm going to go see who I want to see, nobody can tell me what to do, that kind of response. And we're all capable of that at different times, to different stimuli. So it's an opportunity for us all to look and see and do some growth work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lynda, I'm really hearing the deep wisdom in recognizing the flow and the ebb and what's happening in the world today around around these virtues: modesty, patience, fairness, and generosity. And I really hear the deep caring that you carry with you always.
And I thank you for the reference to the ebb and flow, because this visual that we have going here. And I've had the bounty of living close to the ocean, and now I live close to a Great Lake in Canada. And just watching the waves ebb and flow, and you never know what's going to come in on those waves.
Mm-hmm.
And some days it's really peaceful, calm, and some days the power of that, it can throw boulders, 50 feet, be pushed in with the waves. And so with the tide, we call it tides on the ocean. I don't think they do it here on the Great Lakes, but it's again that openness to, you don't know. We don't know what the future is going to bring to us, and we don't know what that is going to result in, having us to allow it to be taken away. What will be taken away as it goes back out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that's important to mention are the elements of nature that exist and interact with us, that have always been there, and we just aren't aware of the integration as of yet. I'm generalizing.
Humanity.
Well, and there's a lot of humanity that recognizes, there are people who are drawn to the water. You and I are both people who, and I know many, 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 many people who are drawn to the water and spend a lot of time playing and praying at the water. But then we have the moon and the stars and all of that you were talking about the tides, and we know emotionally we are connected. They've done studies, they've watched patterns of people, they know the data on full moons and what that does to people just generally. So and the fact that a birch tree is associated with Berkana is interesting too, I think, because shamanically there are layers and layers and layers of integration with nature that we don't see, recognize, perceive, understand, or even think about it, because we're so distracted with the day-to-day. But a birch tree, it's been coming up for me, and it's very symbolic to me. And last year I had to create a regalia, and I actually used birch to create a mask and a chest plate. And yesterday, a piece of property stood out to me so much because it had 5 major kinds of trees on it, but the birch trees were twice as high as everything else. So when you were looking at the pictures of the acreage, it was bizarre looking, because the birch trees stood so much taller, like double in height, so much taller than the pine trees, than the cedar, than the maples, like any other tree that was on that property. It was very bizarre. So I love that it has shown up today, and I love and agree completely that that's where humanity is. We are all kind of we've turned internally. We've been forced to, in this lockdown, kind of isolate, which forces us to go within to a certain degree. And lots of people have taken advantage of the time. They've gone into their yoga practice deeply. They've been working in the meditation. They've been doing their shadow work. They've been meeting in droves and meditating for days. And it is like we're preparing. And you know, the other thing I'm just hearing, and I feel like it's important to say right now before I finish, is you mentioned the beginning of something means that there has to be a death of something. There has to be an ending. And I may have said this before in other places, but change has 3 stages. And stage 1 is the end. Stage 2 is the chaos or the transition. And the 3rd stage is the beginning, where the growth happens and forward movement happens. So just knowing that there are 3 stages to change, for me, is really helpful. So I hope it helps others too. The Viking Runes by Ralph Blum.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And you highlight the idea of the birch tree, you know, the significance of the birch tree. And another factor about the birch tree is how its bark is like layers of skin.
Yes.
And it gets stripped off as it's growing. So again, another aspect of growth and change is being willing to shed the old skin, so to speak,
Yes.
as we grow into the new skin. So yeah, wow.
And
I just am so grateful that we take the time to do this, and I hope that the people who join us really enjoy it as well and see how many gifts we can get out of inspirational resources that just help us go into our own thinking, to go deeper into our own understanding, based on what speaks to us. And you know, it doesn't speak to any of us the same way, but by having these conversations with each other, it expands our ability to understand, you know, like having these conversations with each other and being open to hearing how someone else's perceptions are different than mine, and that it broadens all of our understanding. It helps awaken us to other aspects of things that we may not see on our own. And so how important it is to be able to have these kinds of dialogues, in places where it's safe to just share what your perception is without any fear that somebody's going to say, well, you're wrong, I don't see it that way.
right.
Where we can just be open to being informed and sharing with detachment, and being detached from what other people share too. So again, being responsible for our own inner state and our own inner ability, you know, to help strengthen that ability to hear others with detachment, and openness. Being open to understand where other people are coming from, even if we don't always agree on what we see.
Yeah.
We can always agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And that's a great strength to have too.
Well, and that community, like that company, creates unity in so many ways. Community creates unity, and I feel like that's what this rune is calling us to do, because when we share these stories and create community in safe places, it helps to disperse the resistance, because when we feel alone in our stuff, in our darkness, we harbor it, we hold it, we don't want to talk about it, we hold it close to us. And when we can talk about it, as you say, in safe places where we're not being judged, where the stories aren't being compared, where we're not one-upping each other,
Yeah.
then I do think that it helps to rectify our ability to hold steadfast and allow that blossoming to occur.
Yeah.
That this rune is calling us to. So go forth and blossom.
Yes.
And if you haven't subscribed already,
Oh,
you
yes.
know what to do.
Yes. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
Be well, be safe, and be mindful.
Take care.